Could you read it?
Scott,
That's what it says.
Madam Mayor, it's 6 o'clock.
That's what it says. What happened to my link?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this October 17th work session to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo,
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso,
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell,
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy,
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take public comment, so if you have a need for public comment, please fill out a blue card and make sure you get it up here soon. Thank you very much. So go ahead, City Manager, did you want to start the discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. Welcome to another budget workshop discussion on the capital improvement plan. Tonight's meeting is a follow-up to a conversation we've been having about the budget. And as you know, at the last meeting, y'all approved the concept of moving forward to bring back to you a budget amendment that includes capital items related to the utility funds, the enterprise funds, and that's going to be coming back to you at some point in the future. Right now it's scheduled for the 29th. Unresolved was the general government side of the equation. And so based on the comments that we heard at the last meeting, staff went through and tried to hone down and adjust and to be responsive to those comments. And before you is the pared down version of the request. So going from that large set of 5-year capital needs that really reflected some of the unmet backlog of capital investments, we've now come down to several key categories. In tonight's discussion, we're going to start going down the list here with the motor pool building. The motor pool building, as you'll recall, was something that was damaged back in Francis, Wilma, and Jean. You already know much about the structure and have already approved tentatively to include it in the funding for the bonds for the utility side of the equation. Hey. However, when we divided up the associated use of the building with the utilities, there were still part of the general fund activities that use that structure for building for their motor pool needs, and it's about a third. So right now you have $2.5 million that's currently funded on, I'm sorry, $3 million. He's holding up 3 fingers over there, or he's giving me a salute. One of the two, I don't know, I see fingers. But on this side, the related expenses per rata share is $1.5 million. Is that correct? Okay, so we would respectfully request consideration of giving us an indication or thumbs as we're starting to use on how y'all feel about that or ask questions. I have the appropriate staff here and we can get into more detail if you'd like. So I'll turn that back over to you, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Robinson?
Well, we missed the Pledge of Allegiance, but that's okay. I was wondering about reordering the agenda because we've already talked about the pool, and until we and we had a consensus on a conversation on the pool, and the pool is not on the agenda at all. And I'm wondering when we're going to realize that we have had two opportunities, two times that we came to a consensus on the pool improvement, our Central Park, our oceanfront park. And do we get to talk about the agenda before we start, or what do we do?
I think we should throw out our thoughts on all of these things tonight in regards to the penny sales tax.
Well, I don't think we'd be talking about any of these without the penny sales tax. So, but I want to put a conversation. I want to put on the agenda our oceanfront park.
Madam Mayor.
Quiet in the chambers.
Madam Mayor, in the backup and included on B, the sales tax kitchen table conversation was where that was arranged. Unless y'all want to have a conversation earlier in the agenda. That's y'all's call, but that was the intent of B, the sales tax discussion, and in the backup, which contains the information regarding the beach complex.
It's included in the backup. It's included in the background. The backup. So yeah, I expected that to be part of our kitchen table discussion as well. So why don't we discuss the funds that are highlighted here on the agenda? But first, would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So how I was thinking that we could maybe go through this, all of us together, is we'll go through these items that staff and have them to explain the necessity for those items and why they were put into this mix, because they pared down that list quite a bit, and go through those different items. And then as for the kitchen table discussion, that will be all the uses of sales tax money that we have discussed in the past and in the future, and have a conversation about that there, if that's okay. Does that work to everyone's agreement, so we can at least hear staff's version of why those made it to the list and the necessity for it and what the current status is on those things? And then we can talk about including, and again, the pool backup is in the backup, so it's open game. All right, we're good.
Okay, so if that's, you're going to follow this, the motor pool building discussion, and whether or not y'all are interested in matching the funding that you've put in the other side. We just needed public conversation and direction on how you wanted to proceed with that. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
And that's Jamie's building, the tin building that's falling apart, and
this is the
I'm
pro rata
embarrassed.
share associated with the general fund.
Point of information,
Sure.
how can we approve something without discussing how it's going to be paid for? In the first part of this discussion, which is part A, we're asked to give thumbs up, thumbs down on stuff, but the sources of funding for it, we won't even touch until part B. So we're essentially discussing both at the same time when there is a major issue that's missing from part A, which is the pool.
Well, I'm comfortable just if staff would just go through the items and not ask for a thumbs up.
I'm
or
comfortable
thumbs
with
down.
that, yes.
Okay.
And then we'll have that discussion.
Then
later on.
I'll continue on. I apologize.
Thank you.
The second item, if there's no technical questions or other related questions about the motor pool building, I'll proceed to the second one, Madam Mayor.
Thank
The roads and the ADA sidewalks, this was a number that was discussed and included in the last go-round. Since roads and the infrastructure and roadways was a priority for y'all twice in your sales tax discussions, we thought it was important to include something. So we have attached the value of $1 million a year for 5 years for the roadway and $500,000 a year for ADA sidewalk reconstruction and repair. And if there's any questions about that, I'd be happy to entertain.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. City Manager, is this a maintenance program, this $5 million, or is this actual new construction of roads that are, did make the cut for the bond referendum?
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, the intention of this is to start to work back through the pavement condition index, PCI. That list of roads based on the worst first, picking up where the neighborhood road program will be leaving off at the end of this year.
How many roads will this do?
That is a technical question. I'm going to look to Mr. Brown.
Jamie Brown.
Mr. Brown,
Come on down.
do you know how many roads this $5 million will actually touch, or sections?
For the record, Jamie Brown, Public Works Director. We are, you actually see it coming before you at our next meeting. We're going to be updating all of the PCIs citywide because it's been 2013 last time we had all this done. So things might change a little bit, but as you know, the current bond program ends next year. That got us up to a PCI of 60. So this is going to basically, we would start at 61 and continue going until we run out of whatever we have funded right now. And just like with the bond program, there'll be roads that we think that we can just get away with just doing mill and resurface, and some will have to do a complete tear up, and it could be a reversal. Some roads we think we're going to budget for a complete tear up and might be substantial, so we don't have to do as much as we thought we would. So we're hoping we can get up to a 67, hopefully more. But again, it just depends on.
That's 67 on the PCI.
The
Correct.
PCI.
And the road sections that they've identified that are next in line are currently this list here in your backup under GF 72.
And I believe if I remember correctly, wasn't it? I think it was 10 million, right? Got us basically up to a 70. It wasn't that it was like $1 million per PCI, but it just kind of happened to work out that way with the way the projects were.
Follow up?
Can city manager or somebody address the maintenance needs of the existing bond roads that are being built and/or the potential for $5 million worth of additional roads? Where's the maintenance money coming from?
Well, as you know, we've been consistently adding additional funds each year to our operating budget, so we can actually tackle more than we've done in the past, which has been not sufficient for our roadway network for our size city. Ultimately, the goal is to get up to 1.5 million a year for maintenance. We're just not there yet.
What's our current number?
Well, we had 400,000 in the road improvement fund. We had just under, I believe it was 900,000 in the gas tax, and then we also have the two funds that fall in our streets division, which is our materials and equipment, and then our other contractual line item.
So the bottom line is we don't have enough money to maintain the roads that we're building now and potentially anticipating in this list,
We are getting there. We have much more money this year than we had last year.
but we're not there.
Not quite.
We don't have sufficient funds to maintain the roads that we're
That is
building.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Just to clarify further, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, our goal trajectory over several years was to try to use the computer. It's called pavement micropaper.
Micropaper.
That gives us some estimates for those numbers, but we're not there yet.
But the numbers that you just mentioned and threw out were more than 1.5 million.
But
The
some of that includes things
900,000,
like
you had
street lights.
400,000.
That some of that money's divided up into different functions that's not specific to roads.
That's correct. Like keep in mind the street lighting, even though the electric maintains them, that's paid for out of public services.
So how much of the 900,000 is street?
Well, I mean, I believe last year, I can't remember what we had access to last year. It wasn't the full amount.
I thought it was bumped up to $1 million last year.
Nope.
It was not the full amount. I'd have to go back and look to see the exact number.
What about the other number? Yeah, I would like to see how close we are.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
No, I just want you to restate, because I think the mayor was trying to qualify what you were saying. So we don't have enough money to maintain the roads that we're building. Is that correct?
That's a correct statement.
Okay, thank you.
And
That's all I need
you
to
know,
know.
well, keep in mind, the bond program is only covered a third of the city.
I got you.
So there's still a lot of work to be done and a lot of maintenance items too that are not going to fall within the program.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardy?
Yes. So when you say ADA sidewalks, are you talking about places where ADA sidewalks do not exist? Or are you talking about places where the sidewalks are not in a good condition? And they need to be rebuilt.
All of the above.
All of the above.
We have a lot of sidewalks in the city which do not meet, unfortunately, ADA compliance. We have a lot of corners where there are not curb ramps. Every corner should have a curb ramp on them.
Right.
We still have a lot of corners in the city that still have telephone poles right in the center of them where a ramp would be, where a wheelchair cannot get by it. We've got a lot of sidewalks in the city where you can't get from one corner to the next without, broken sidewalk, missing sidewalk. You can't get from A to B if you're in a wheelchair on a sidewalk without having to go in the street and make your way down. So it's kind of all the above.
Okay.
It's just a matter of correcting the entire network at some point.
Fantastic. Can you talk to me about, we get CDBG funds every year. Usually the allotment is just south of $300,000.
Correct.
It's an entitlement program. We are entitled to it for as long as CDBG will be around, and it will be around. Have we thought about using CDBG funds, or, for example, fronting 3 years worth of CDBG funds all at once through a Section 108 loan program, with HUD through the county, so that we could get 3 years of CDBG funds all at once. Have you thought about doing something like that to?
Well, if you remember
Compare
correctly, when CDBG funds was when those funds were coming to Public Works, we were utilizing those for our greenways
Right.
and some of our east-west unimproved right-of-ways
Right.
that we were not going to pave. And the last time we actually had access to that money, we actually combined that with some of our operating costs. It did Second Avenue South and Dixie
Right.
Federal,
Right.
Because it wasn't enough just on its own to do that.
But you could
And
use
then-
CDBG funds for sidewalks
Correct.
in 9 out of 11 census tracts
Yeah,
in the city.
but I mean, then it went to code,
Right.
so it has not been back in Public Works since it went to the code officers and everything.
Right.
So,
And right now it's in leisure services.
I believe right now it's in leisure
Right.
as well for some parks or something
some
like
parks,
that. So
okay.
we currently do not have access to the CDBG funds.
I think in the future, we should explore that. That's a valid use of CDBG funds. Again, 9 out of 11 census tracts you can spend CDBG funds in here in the city, and that's something I'd be for. I'd also be for trying to do it all based on today's labor costs. I don't know what tomorrow's labor costs will be, but they've gone up over the past few years. So we can get 3 years worth. That would give us about $900,000. That would reduce the rest of it, and we can spread that out throughout the next 5, 6, 7, 8 year period. That'd be something I'd be very much for. We've had conversations about maintaining the existing roadway. I recognize that we probably need more general funding for roadway maintenance. So yeah, okay, those are my questions.
Also, Jamie, talking with the folks at the TPA too, we can also do through our local initiatives, the TPA, and also the Safe Routes to School, and we can probably get funding through those places too to
Right.
piggyback into some of our ADA compliant sidewalks. There's a number of programs I know I was talking to him about that I don't think that we need to spend a lot more time, I think, looking at some of those extra little pots of money. I know we've had some big projects that have been very ambitious, but maybe we could easily use them for ADA compliance.
Yeah, and a lot of that, unfortunately, isn't going to apply to our neighborhood, just local roads. There are certain roadway classifications that those grant funds and everything would apply to. If you remember correctly, this past year I applied for the local initiatives grant for G&H here from 6th to Lake Worth Road and all the side streets going up to Dixie, that whole process. And
And I had a long conversation with Nick, and actually
Yeah.
they're going to be revisiting some of that. So we need to talk about that.
Yeah, it's
Free up
just-
at least $500,000.
Yeah, we were at the governing board meeting today, and we had that conversation again. I had it with some of the TPA staff, and it's a matter of incorporating some additional pedestrian issues and bike and some other stuff we can do to kind of make it work.
It'll work.
So there are avenues that way.
For that
But for some of the just plain sidewalk work
Right.
and just general maintenance work, that's supposed to fall on the city, and typically you're not going to get grant funding to just do regular city maintenance.
Understood.
work. It has to be part of a much larger project that usually incorporates some type of.
I totally get it, but we can network in the portions of those into
Absolutely.
there and cover it with grant funds. Okay. Okay. Did you want to continue on?
Is there any other questions for Mr. Brown? Okay. So that deals with the roads and the ADA sidewalks issue. The next one was cybersecurity IT. As you'll recall, in the last project dump that y'all received, there was quite a bit of money in IT, and the great majority of that was related to our ERP system, which, as you know, we've been working with the same system, and it's changed hands many times and blah, blah, blah. We pulled that back out, and however, in talking to IT and looking at the items that remained on the list, there was some interest about making sure that anything related to cybersecurity, because you know, and we don't talk about it a lot publicly, but we're constantly under a barrage of hackers and people trying to get into our systems for probably nefarious reasons or just some kind of general mayhem. And some of the local cities around us, such as up the street here, have been held ransom for Bitcoin. So we've done, at this point, knock on wood, a very good job of implementing both upgrades to the programs, but also the hardware and the systems, and availing ourselves of things that Homeland Security and different entities make available to cities and utilities to keep us out of trouble. However, there's a few things here that Lee Minke and our IT department has requested, and these were the things that stayed on the list for your consideration that are related directly to cybersecurity. They total $900,000.
How much was Riviera held ransom?
630,000 or something like that. It was Bitcoins. The Riviera Beach
The
ransom.
Riviera Beach, they were held ransom for
600,000.
It's like 600,000.
Okay. Mr. Hardy?
Yeah, so most of this stuff is spread out over 5 years. One of the items is not spread out over 5 years. That would be the $150,000 data recovery, storage, and backup item GF62. But that puts this at about 150,000 for most of these items. It's $150,000 a year, and I'm wondering why we can't find money in our normal budget to do that. And I guess if we are in belt tightening mode, why aren't we going all of the way? If there are things that we need to pay for that are vital, you know, I would prefer that this come out of our general fund budget, and you know, not that it's not, it is, but if it's that important, it should come from our general fund budget.
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Hardy, if that's the direction of the board, obviously we'll shoehorn these back in. At this point in time, as you'll recall in the last operating budget that was approved, we had trouble covering all our expenses, and that's why we created this list of what were defined as capital projects for consideration for funding from other sources. So that's a policy question. I just would not really know how to shoehorn in much more into the current budget and still make ends meet, but these were the security related items. Yes, they're spaced out over several years. I believe that's partially because there's some licensing that occurs after the installation, or I'm not completely, obviously I'm not the IT guy in the room, and Lee unfortunately is at a conference right now. But that's a policy direction from y'all. We would prefer to install the hardware though now.
You know, I recognize that it may be difficult to shoehorn in $150,000 into this year's budget, and to do that again in the following year's budget. But part of the reason why we'd have to go back and shoehorn it in is because we're doing something that other cities don't do, which is bifurcating our budgeting process and having a discussion about one type of expenditures at one part of the budgeting discussion and another type of expenditures at another part of the budget session, right? Had all these things been grouped together the way that the other 38 municipalities in Palm Beach County group them together when they have their budget discussions, all these expenditures at once, you know, we would have been able to think about this more holistically. But I would ask that we find the money in the general fund budget to do that.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Madam Mayor,
I can hear you.
I said, yes, ma'am. I'm getting a little concerned here because I'm hearing comments about potential future grants. I'm hearing other potential funding sources in the future in relation to, you know, maybe offsetting some of these line items that we've gotten to so far. And now I'm hearing conversations about process that we didn't properly go through the process. So my suggestion would be if all these things are in fact true, then maybe we should just, you know, go back to the drawing board and start all over again, because we're going to sit here all night and probably another meeting after that, and arm wrestle over whether or not, you know, we can take out this line item that's on this sheet and somehow shoehorn it into the budget with future funds or grants that we don't know that actually exist. So we're going to actually be using a lot of smoke and mirrors to come to our final conclusion. And I'm just wondering if we might want to have a conversation about determining whether or not the process we've used was accurate and proper. And for those who believe we have grants available to us, if they can identify specifically what those grants are and how much they are, and tell us with some degree of certainty that we're going to get them, then we can have a conversation about using those future grants to offset some of these line items on this list tonight.
Madam Mayor?
I would just say that we're going through this process just like we would any other line item process of a budget. We're just doing it on this in regards to the sales tax. I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm fine with the process. I don't have any. I'm just bringing up points of fact. That is, I'm not arguing, I'm not debating, and I'm just throwing my thoughts out. This is the only chance that we have to actually share our opinions and thoughts on certain things, so that's what I'm doing. I don't need to debate. I don't need to have a problem with it. I'm good, certainly happy going through the process, and let's have some healthy, good conversation, guys.
And one more point. Well, there's also something that we don't want to lose in this conversation. There's another $7 million on the table of projects that the city needs done. $7 million.
Where are they?
They were in the list we had the last meeting. We have $7 million that was cut out, but is that pretty much close to a good number, Finance Director?
Can we just,
Well, Madam Mayor, I think it's
Address
important that, you know, it's been said by one or more members of this commission over time that everything needs to be on the table. And I want everybody to understand what we're faced with. And we've got another $7 million worth of deferred capital projects out there somewhere that, in addition to possibly surgically removing some of these line items, we're going to have to deal with over the coming years. And I don't see a funding source for these projects.
we've always had $7 million worth of wish list projects out
Yeah.
there and things to do. Every single year we've come to a budget process. It's always been that way. It's
Oh,
never-
okay.
it's-
Okay.
I mean, we went through that
That's
the last
forward-
meeting.
That's forward thinking.
No, I'm just saying, we went through that last meeting. There's always gonna be things we need and always things we want and always needs that come up. I mean, I don't wanna get tied up in the minutia, guys. Let's just go through this.
Okay.
Talk about it, come
Fair
up with
enough.
solutions. Okay?
Yeah, the grant program that's been mentioned out there is one that we access every year. It's CDBG. It was created in an act of Congress in 1974, I believe it is. Nearly every municipality in the country gets it in some way, shape, or another. We get it every year. We're not going to stop getting it. And so, the question is, insofar as some of these things qualify, right, are eligible for funding under the CDBG program, we might just decide to work, and I think it might be beneficial to think about working these things into our CDBG programs over the next several years, or if we could again front our CDBG funding with a Section 108, which we'd have to work through the county to get, that'd be something that we could discuss. That was the grant program that I had mentioned. I don't view it as a potential grant program because it's not, it exists. We get it every year. We're going to get it next year. And I think we should consider that.
You're referring to the ones from the local initiative.
Oh, okay.
Because
all right.
they're new rules this year.
Yeah. All
Vice
right.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Just want to comment on the CDBG funding. We're not going to be able to encumber into the future
Pass it.
CDBG funds. Madam Mayor, we won't be able to encumber CDBG funds into the future because there's a process that has to be gone through to have that CDBG application approved and the funding received, and it involves the participation of the public. So I don't think that if we desired to commit to 2 or 3 years down the road worth of CDBG funding for any reason, we would be able to do that because we would be circumventing the process that's been established on how, that grant application is put together and executed.
Well, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, and can this be, yeah, come on.
Sure. Well, okay, just as a point of fact, what the Section 108 program allows you to do is, it allows you, let's say for 3 consecutive years, your allotment is $300,000. It allows you to take $900 up front, and then you basically forego the next 3 years of CDBG funding. So we could take $900 up front, pay for $900,000 of these ADA sidewalks, and then spread out the remaining $1.6 million over a 5, 6, 7, 8 year period, which would be manageable, I think. And again, I think it's an option that should be discussed. And there's a process for that is prescribed, by HUD. That, as you said, we would have to go through some applications through the public process. But at the end of the day, it's this board with the input of the public that decides what we do with this CDBG funding. And so I think it's something that we should explore. It's not unheard of. Other cities have used it in this county, around the state, and around the country, and I think we should explore it.
Did we do that for the greenways?
I'm sorry.
We didn't do, because we had multiple years
Yeah,
of greenway projects.
It was accumulated funds that previous,
Oh,
We hadn't.
right.
It's about $700,000,
$700,000.
Madam Mayor, that was about to be
Okay.
taken back by the county.
Okay, let's go on to the next. City Manager?
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. Commissioners, The next category is what we've termed general government projects. This was the larger list of all the items that there was questions about. Was it a priority? Was it a low priority? Could we go out and get FERDAP grants from the state and different things like that? So we distilled down a list of items that are related to health and safety in some regards, and based on some of the needs that we have. And the list is, I guess I could just basically by title read them out. Here in City Hall, the elevator replacement for $100,000. The CRA Hatch building, the old Shuffleboard Courts, needs a fire alarm system for $30,000. The City Hall Annex, the electrical system upgrade there, it's still the old wire and knob systems. Yeah, she's got her eyes like that. It's $50,000. Public Safety Complex, an elevator replacement there. That's the Sheriff's Office building, correct? The Fire Station number 2 roof replacement and alarm is a total of $290,000. The library electrical upgrades there as well as an older building, that's $75,000. Bryan Park, the band shell roof is really in bad shape and is showing it, as well as some electrical upgrades for that facility at $145,000. Leisure Services, we have a generator replacement, which would be at the beach, I believe. I'm trying to remember what happened to the other. We'd never had a generator there. We do. Okay, it needs to be replaced.
Where's the elevator at the beach? I thought
There's two.
I see 2 elevators, but none of them are at the beach. Wasn't there an elevator problem?
That was a cab. We took it off. We went back and re-examined the need for that.
Okay.
That's why we were trying to make a determination, things that needed to be really addressed sooner rather than later. The generator replacement at the beach, a bench and table replacement across the beach complex. If I remember the old fancy ones that were designed are falling apart, breaking, we've actually had some lawsuits on those, and they need to be really removed and replaced. The casino building painting and repairs, $150,000 for that kind of maintenance work that needs to happen. Chiller replacement on the AC, it's time for that. The golf club has a couple of problems. The HVAC out there needs to be replaced for $25,000, and renovations in general. If you go into the restrooms in different areas, there's things that it's long in the tooth. So if you add all those general projects up, it comes to just under $1.3 million of requests. And at this time, I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody has on any specifics.
Commissioner Hardy?
Sure. So I see that there are 4 items on here. I just want to make sure, where's that chiller replacement again? GF51?
I believe that's at the beach.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Okay, they're shaking their heads over there. You can come up if you want.
It is at the beach?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So the beach is its own fund. And to the extent that it's its own fund, I'm wondering, can it be funded by, over a period of time at the beach through the beach fund? Now, we can have a discussion about that, but that's my first question. The other thing is there's a line item here, GF3, which is at the CRA Hatch building, and I'm wondering if the CRA can pay for that, being that it's their building. But once you take off the $410,000 of stuff that's at the beach that could potentially be funded at the beach, and we have to look at their budget again, you're looking at $885,000 of stuff, and then at that point, I'm looking at so let's start there. What can be paid for by funds at the beach?
Absolutely anything at the beach, on the other side of the bridge, basically, can be used in the beach fund.
Right.
And as you know, the beach fund's situation is not that great. You'd have to address, obviously, balancing out the revenues and trying to generate the extra to cover these expenses. So that's a policy discussion. I don't know if you have anything to add or
I did just want to mention, one of the GF3 was one of the ones you mentioned. The city actually owns that building that the CRA operates out of, the Hatch building. So that is a city-owned facility.
Okay.
So we are responsible for anything that goes wrong on that roof. There is currently no fire alarm system.
Okay.
We've had issues there, so we do own that facility.
Okay. Okay, we can leave that in, but I would like for stuff at the beach to be paid for by the beach fund, and that would take significantly off of the $1295 here that we see.
Bruce, you want to do something?
Thank you. For the record, Bruce Miller, Finance Director. Regarding if there's sufficient revenues to cover the additional capitalized expenditures, based on the budget this year, there's $7,000 of net revenues projected. Additionally, the fund has a negative fund balance. So it's imperative that we start building up that negative fund balance.
Are you saying that it has no reserves?
Has no reserves, correct?
Okay, so the general fund is paying into the beach fund if it's negative. I mean, it's not zero. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, any deficit is actually covered by the general fund.
That was not what was presented to us at with Stantec. We didn't see that in that presentation with Stantec.
Well, I can't tell you what was or what was not presented. This year, we have a surplus, but the cumulative deficit is over many, many prior years. So I just can tell you that that fund has a negative available fund balance.
So what was presented to us, because that is not what was presented to us a few months ago when we got the whole presentation on the beach fund. So I'm wondering what changed in 3 months, or not even.
Well, the fund balances are reported in the audited financial statements. Do you have the specific amount, Corinne?
So what?
It's a negative 3.7 million.
That the general fund did not pay $3.7 million into the beach fund.
These are cumulative over many,
They're
many,
cumulative
many
losses.
years.
Okay, but the losses get subtracted from reserves that are there, right? So I'm not asking for an add up of the losses at the beach. I'm asking for reserves net of the losses.
There are no reserves.
Again, for the presentation that the Stantec model provided you showed the current year's anticipated surplus or deficit. And you're absolutely correct that the projected it was a surplus for fiscal year 2020.
What was the surplus that they projected?
It's about $10,000, which is, so that was the surplus. And they project the surpluses is a little bit differently. They're looking at really retained earnings as an aggregated amount, whereas when we talk about restricted and unrestricted fund balances, there are different classifications. So when I say that there's going to be $7,000 of surplus, that's the surplus that can be used for additional appropriation. So there's different types of restrictions on the financial statements that may be somewhat confusing the discussion. And because, again, Stantec models only show what they call working capital, it's just a difference between assets and liabilities, their projected assets and liabilities.
Well, then I think we need to have a conversation about the usefulness of the models that's presented to this commission to help us make decisions about it. If they're showing us stuff that's not useful, I don't know why we're seeing it. Just because we form opinions and impressions based on what our consultant, who we pay, shows us. If they're not showing us useful data, then what's the whole point of it? I don't understand. What's the whole point of that exercise if it's not useful?
I don't know if you want to go into that
No.
level of conversation.
I mean,
we can have
that's a
debate over
valid
that.
issue. They showed us something that's very different. From
It's
what-
very useful and has served the city very well to give you a year-to-year look at cash in, cash out, and fund balance across all your operations in a consistent format, so you can set your rates, your parking fees, and everything. And it's done that very well. We've had multitude of conversations about the inability of the beach fund to really pay all its expenses and to build up a fund balance. That's nothing new with any of these funds. We can have a more in-depth conversation about that, Madam Mayor, at some other time if you want to.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. While we're on the subject of the beach, this $7,000 surplus, are we paying anything back? So
That's including the debt service,
we actually paid some debt service back?
correct?
Complete payment this year.
It's only been, what, 7 years? 8 years? Well, better late than never. I agree with Commissioner Hardy. I was going to ask about the fire alarm system with the CRA. But, $30,000 on out of millions, it's not a lot, but it's $30,000. The other question I have, City Manager, there seem to be two large items here that are missing, and forgive me if I've forgotten how we're going to address it, but the pier, repairs at the pier, has that been funded? And if so, who's funded it?
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, Lauren Bennett, Leisure Services Director, can give you a more detailed answer. So some of it is funded, yes.
Good evening. For the record, Lauren Bennett, Director of Leisure Services. So the pier portion that we did in fiscal year 19 basically stabilized the pier. And in our current FY20 budget, we do have funds allocated to keep correcting the issues that were not critical to the pier. So the critical stuff has been fixed. Now we have an annual maintenance budget to address the rest of the items in the pier.
How much was the total
Now,
for those repairs?
Thank you for that clarification. Now, the other question I
say
have
that?
is, I'm sorry?
The total for the pier for FY19, we were at 600,000 for the pier, just about.
Thank you. That's important also.
Commissioner Robinson?
Well, while you're here, how much
I'm
is,
sorry, Commissioner Robinson, he wasn't finished.
Thank you. Also, there's been some discussion, as we all know, we own the building that Benny's currently occupies. Where do we stand on, when the roof falls in or something of that nature happens up there? What are we going to do about that? What are we planning? How are we planning to address that?
We're currently looking at our options, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, about what would be possible, and even so much so as you'll recall on the 15th meeting, we had a conversation about the need to extend the terms of the leases at the beach from 20 to 30 years so that in negotiations there would be a more reasonable time to pay back an investment in a capital asset, either factored into a lease payment to us, or if we did a partnership where someone who would take over and run the restaurant would actually do the facility, it would basically wash out. But that term was part of the conversation, if you'll recall. So we're exploring options.
Okay, I do want to comment though, just for everybody's edification. It's a little bit of a deep dive here, but I want to throw it out there. In the event that we have to replace that building, we're probably going to have to borrow some money, one way or the other. We're going to have to borrow some money. And if we do that, there's going to be a debt service associated with acquiring those funds. I just want everybody to know that currently Benny's on the beach, they pay roughly $250,000 a year to the city. Okay, that $250,000 is a significant financial contribution to the overall beach fund. If the day comes that building has to be replaced and we have to borrow money, that debt service is in a large part going to wipe out that $250,000 that we currently enjoy as a contribution to the overall beach fund. If that happens, we are going to blow a much larger hole in the overall beach fund going forward. I just want everybody in this room to be aware of that. Okay, so as we talk about doing other things on the beach and adding extra expenses, extra maintenance expenses or whatever, let's keep that in mind. That's on the horizon for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
just how much is in the annual budget for paint? Is there a line item?
We've never had a line item.
Never
for-
budgeted for paint.
Not since the building's been redone.
So the only thing you budget for maintenance is,
Like standard repairs, the paint budget we've requested for the past 2 years to have it in, but it just hasn't made it through the budget just because of the expense cost.
thank you.
Vice Mayor?
And just for the record, the other thing that I see missing from this that we've had conversations are the parking needs downtown, some form of a parking structure. So I'd like us to make sure we have that conversation tonight.
Mr. Hardy?
As far as us building a parking structure downtown, my feeling is absolutely not. Parking is not an amenity, it's a utility. It's something that people, use. It's not something that people come for. And, what I'll say is that I think it's much more vital to make space in our downtown, not for vehicle storage, but for like actual dwellings, right? So I'd much rather have units in the downtown where people can live rather than stalls where people can park their vehicles. And if you think that a lack of parking keeps people from the downtown, every year we have festivals in that downtown, and somehow people find a way to park, So I think also that before you start adding to the supply of parking, you might want to ask yourself, how are we rationing the supply that we have? Typically before one adds parking supply, one puts a price on the available parking spaces, which causes people to think differently about how they use them, which increases the turnover. And if you doubt me on this, there's a lot of research on it that's readily available. And so, on us spending money on a parking garage, I would say absolutely not. That leads me to ask another question about, I'm wondering, how many dollars exactly have we sunk into the downtown parking? For surface lots, but what is apparently going to be put out? Okay, 1.857.
That's for the actual structure.
Right. So given that we know that the CRA is going to put out an RFP for land that was purchased with our penny sales tax funds, and given that one of the criteria is going to have to be that the city gets paid back, right? I would like us to maybe take a portion of this stuff and defer it for 1 year to see, whether, and I think the CRA will be able to get their money or get our money out of those properties, and we end up with an extra $1.8 million of funding. That's something that I think we should explore. But I am not in favor of us building a parking garage. I don't think the downtown has a parking problem. I think it has a people problem.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify Commissioner Hardy's point, the $1.8 million was used in partnership with the CRA. We bought the land for parking.
Right.
When it does finally get sold, one of the conditions that may come out of it is if the developer doesn't want to supply the parking that we purchased to the public, they would pay us back the $1.8 million, which is what he's referring to. And it would come back because that was sales tax money, and it has to be used for that purpose. It can't be used for any other need like that. So I just wanted to expand on that thought. Thank you.
Right.
Commissioner Amoroso?
And I totally disagree with you. I live in the downtown. I also am a merchant, was a merchant in the downtown for years, and we do have a people problem, but I think it's partially due to parking issues. I have the luxury of having my own parking spot in the Lucerne, so I don't fight for parking, but I can tell you people do. And is in reference to your huge event in the downtown, they park in front of people's homes. They park in people's driveways. They park anywhere they can find parking, yes, for a long weekend. This is not happening on a regular basis, I can assure you. We can argue all night, but and I can share with you the merchants that are in the room too can also share their stories, their horror stories, and the issues. I totally believe that the structure that will go behind the Paws on the Avenue that we spent taxpayers' dollars with the CRA accumulating should be work-live space, should be small retail, affordable retail. People will argue we can't get rid of the retail we have. We have old inventory, we have large inventory, and people coming in want smaller spaces. They need somewhere to park. And I truly believe that if we get the $1.8 million back, it should be put into some kind of parking structure behind the Playhouse. And again, I work and I live in this area, and I know hands-on.
I agree with you 100%. Commissioner Robinson?
Maybe at some point in the near future, we should talk about a parking authority that is going to address the high cost of free parking. It took us, I want to say it took me 1.5 years to address the underperforming parking rates at our beach, and it didn't affect the numbers of parkers at all, but it increased our budget by $800,000. at some point, we're going to have to address the cost of parking downtown and, to subsidize a parking garage for the merchants that are already in business. And we have a parking issue. We don't have a parking problem. So the advance of different modes of transportation, and Uber and scooters and maybe even public transportation in terms of public golf carts or whatever, larger golf carts, would minimize the wish of a parking structure unless it included housing. So that's, I think, a parking garage for another time, not tonight.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
I just wanted to, first of all, agree with Commissioner Amoroso on his thoughts on the parking situation downtown and the garage. Also, I just want to comment, Commissioner Robinson asked earlier about our line item budget for paint at the beach. I want to remind everybody that those leases up there, for generally speaking, have a $7 per square foot CAM value, which basically doesn't pay for the toilet paper on the beach. That was addressed prior to those deals being consummated back in the day. So that's why we are getting our butts kicked in many respects on the beach, because we never did deals that were sufficient enough to maintain the beach up there. So keep that in mind, because it's going to come back to later this evening in a different form. Thank you.
Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, the final thing I'll say, while I, know and respect, many of the merchants in downtown, what cities have often found is that what merchants in downtowns say about what can solve problems in downtowns have not always been found to be true. And I'll give you an example. Just to the north of us, there were merchants in the downtown who said, "What, you're going to rip up our streets? What, you're going to take away parking spaces? What, you're going to narrow our streets? The sky is going to fall in downtown West Palm Beach." And they did exactly that. The sky still is above the earth there, as far as I'm concerned, and it's much improved, and it's much more vibrant space. And in that case, the merchants in the downtown, while they're well-meaning and while they're there all the time, it takes a macro viewpoint to understand what makes an entire downtown work. And as far as the parking needs downtown, I was not too long ago, I was downtown. I was at a restaurant downtown, and I watched the owner of the restaurant get in and out of his car right in front of his restaurant, right? And so in that case, you have an owner who's asking the city, "We need more parking supply, we need more parking supply," but he's taking up the prime parking supply in front of his own store. And so I think we need to think about how we use the parking we have before we spend money adding to the supply of parking in the downtown. From an economic standpoint, people are going to use stuff abusively if the stuff is free. You put a price on it, and it changes the way they think about it. And in addition to that, I'm just going to make a link to the environment, because I know that Commissioner Amoroso cares a great deal about the environment. About the environment. I would ask the commissioner to look at the research on parking supply, and what that does to encourage driving. Okay, and so there is a definite link between the parking supply in certain areas and the amounts that people drive. And there's a link between that and their GHG emissions and their GHG footprint. And what I would say is that if you care about the environment, which Commissioner Amoroso has said that he does, if he cares about doing what we can here at a local level to stem the tide of climate change, which Commissioner Amoroso said that he does, we need to link all of these things together, and parking is one of those things that need to be linked. There are alternatives to people solo driving to the places that they want to go. These alternatives, such as Uber, such as scooters, such as other things, are becoming increasingly popular. And, with autonomous vehicles being right there, I think it would be a really foolish thing to do to sink tons of city funds into building a structure to store people's personal vehicles. Car ownership is one of the few things where having a private asset creates a public liability. And that absolutely needs to be addressed.
Commissioner Amoroso?
I'm good. You know, I get it, but your tourists, your vacationers are still driving a vehicle that want to park. And if there is no parking, they're going to drive right by Lake Worth. And I see it on a regular basis. If they can't conveniently get close to 2J's, they're not stopping at 2J's. And I totally agree with you where merchants should not be parking in front of their businesses. However, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be a paid issue. I don't think anybody's talked about free parking. There needs to be a paid component to actually pay for it. And in a perfect world, everybody in the world drives Uber, but I still take my vehicle. You know, I walk as much as possible. I have the ability to walk, but I still need to drive. You know, other people need to drive. They need somewhere to park. People coming to the Playhouse, you know.
And you guys don't have to wear heels. It's not so easy to walk 7 city blocks in high heel. Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, and I just want to weigh in too. I appreciate the comments of Commissioner Hardy regarding, transportation alternatives and all the things, some of the other thoughts that were thrown out here this evening. The reality of it is we are 7 square miles. The reality is we are landlocked. The reality is that most of our residents still own vehicles and they're not going to take an Uber to the downtown. Okay, and I'm only talking about the residents, and that's before you start talking about the tourists who, as far as autonomous vehicles are concerned, they're still quite a ways away. So, we need to talk about the here and now when we're talking about our needs. Yes, we need to keep an eye to the future, but I think we really need to focus on the here and the now and the absolute need that we have today, and not talk about what may happen in 15, 20, or 50 years when we're all gone.
Commissioner Robinson?
I'm glad to hear her talk about tourists, and I'm looking forward to tourists being attracted to our oceanfront park, if we're talking about tourists.
Perfect segue. Let's move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our sales tax kitchen table. I'm going to throw something out there, guys. And
Get throw some spaghetti on the fridge.
I'm going to throw some spaghetti on the fridge. I'm going to throw a couple things out there. Don't shoot the messenger, but for lack of wanting to sit here and go round and round and round and round and round and round and round again, we can throw this out, and then maybe we can bring up our Finance Advisory Board to offer some suggestions. But I think that we should I want to just lay out some thoughts that I have, and they're not set in stone, and this is a starting point, but I want to just kind of lay it all on the line. That was what I think Commissioner Robinson had in mind when he mentioned the kitchen table. And, we've been hemming and hawing on all these different projects and trying, to get our points across and to do this. I'm really happy with the report that came back from staff with all of these different items on them. I'm glad they have to do with public safety and also to get us positioned to have the right funds that we need in certain areas. Yeah, we're always, a few shillings behind, but we're getting there, and we're able to use the sales tax to kind of shore us up, is a good thing, especially in regards to roads. Nobody's talked about infrastructure and roads more than me in the last 8 years. So, to not use some of this penny sales tax to help shore you up, Jamie, and your department, and to do it. Also, your building. We've been talking about that building for 8 years, and I'm embarrassed when anyone even goes near it. It's in such disrepair, and quite honestly, I'm worried about the safety of our staff in that building as well. So I'm going to throw this out. I'm not going to. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm going to suggest, based on this list, and I've crunched numbers, looked at projects, gone through this. If we could cut, give me a few minutes. If we could cut $1 million from this budget that the city has proposed, okay? In here, if we could get that CDBG money possibly and some of the local initiatives in reference to the ADA components or whatever, if we could cut somewhere in here $1 million from this budget, that would leave us with, that would leave us completely and address every single item on this agenda that the city needs. Would leave us with would be close to $6 million, okay? That we've talked about a pool, and I know $9 to $13 million was suggested on a pool. if we took $6 million and applied it to a pool and did out, which I have pictures here, this is Miami Springs Aquatic Center, was built just a few years ago for $5 million. You can take a look at it. Very similar to some of the projects that we've had shown before us. It's a scaled down version, has some lap lanes on it, has a recreational area to it. It's a pared down version of that was given to us. It has cabanas, it has offices for staff and a lifeguard, but instead of having a built out concession stand and some of the extra amenities that this feature has, they built this for $5 million. Okay? If we could do something that would be like this and do a shell up there and talk about putting out an RFP for a business to come and operate a concession like we've talked about, but us funding it and building it out. Now, let's not talk about us funding and building it out. Let's talk about somebody coming to the table that would want to do a concession like we discussed, a resort style concession around that pool, and do their own build out and pay us rent, maintain their own property. It takes that component out of it and also gives us now money in to this operations to do it. Now, in reference to the parking structure, as I said, Commissioner Vice Mayor, I agree with you as to what you said about the parking structure. I also have that list here, which was 1.857 million, 482.50. That money, if whoever redevelops that area that was brought through the CRA and they don't do a parking component, then they have to pay this money back to us. That was a loan in regards to that, unless they pay and build their own structure. If they don't build their own structure, that $2 million should go towards a parking structure in the downtown. That money was given as penny sales tax money, so it would be using penny sales tax money, and it would go towards a parking structure. This way, other than $1 million, every single issue is addressed, every department gets the love, and I think that we could get her done. What do you think? Commissioner Hardy?
Most of, especially, at the beginning, I'm open to that. The one thing, again, that I am totally closed to is the idea of a parking garage in the downtown. One of the reasons why is, we'd get back, let's say we get back the 1.8 million, which I think that we would get. Build a parking garage, it costs upwards of $25,000 per stall. So to build out 100 spaces, you're talking about $2.6 million right up front. To build out 125 spaces, you get up to 3.2. What we have right there is not too far off from that. And frankly, you take away those properties that we bought on First Avenue, and we could add parking spaces at the surface level without paying very much for them, if you would like to add supply. But a parking structure is prohibitively expensive, and even if we got that 1.8 back, we would not be building a parking structure that would put a real dent in the supposed problem that we have there. And one of the reasons, by the way, that I put height on the table, what was that, on Tuesday, is because it sure would be great if someone came in and we did a public-private partnership and they did, parking on the bottom and housing on top. But remember, for each unit of housing they have up there, they have to have a unit of parking, right? So they'd have to have parking for their units and parking for the public's units, and they'd have to do it all vertically in less than 65 feet, which, if you talk to most planners, is extraordinarily difficult to do in 65 feet. And so I don't think that what the town needs today, even you talk about addressing our needs today, I don't think the town needs a parking garage today. I think the town needs better parking management. We're talking about pricing parking in the future. We should price it today and change the behavior of the people who use it, and then go from there. So I like mostly everything except for the bit about the parking garage. We need a pool. If we have to compromise, fine. We can compromise, but we need a pool. The people have spoken. We can talk about the amenities of the pool and how much it costs, but on the parking garage, I just see it as as a not great investment.
Well, the only thing about that is whether it's surface parking or a parking lot, first of all, you said there was no parking problem. It was a people
I
problem, you
don't.
said.
Yeah, I don't think
So
there is.
you just ruined your own argument.
Well, I don't. I didn't.
You just blew your own argument there.
Well, I'm sorry, but when did I say that we had a
Is
parking
it,
problem?
if we have the perceived parking problem, then we would need a building, is what you just said.
I said
It's
if
okay.
we have the if, but I did not say that we do.
Okay, we don't go back and forth, but thank you. So anyway, I won't go there. Mr. Robinson?
Well, the kitchen table was really a proposal to talk about really, I don't want to call it value engineering, but to agree on what we most want out of our improvements at the Oceanfront Park, and to talk about $5 million there. And we've talked about do it right, do it once, do it right for roads. That is a recipe for disaster for $5 million when we haven't really finalized the plan for the development up there. And we had consensus twice about in the neighborhood of $9 million. And we were in agreement with that. We have the ability to use $9 million to generate income, revenue from our Oceanfront Park. And we still haven't addressed the existing potential for revenue. We're getting to a management problem because we had solved, or we were in the direction of making decisions, and then the longer you spread out a decision, the more questions come up, the more projects come up, the more difficult it is to make a decision. So we need to get back to focusing on making a decision on our Oceanfront Park improvements tonight.
I think that have you seen this, by the way? Have you seen this?
Yeah,
It's pretty extraordinary.
but we were talking about a tourist attraction with generating revenue. Public-private partnership is absolutely the way to, that we're going to do this. But
Well, I'm concerned that, honestly, is that I don't want this. We all have wants and needs, and the city has things that are falling apart and whatever. And I don't want this to become a political nightmare. I don't want this to become, I don't want this to get drawn out another 10, 15 years the way it had in the past. I mean, I think that we could honestly, we're making everybody happy. We're addressing all the basic public safety needs that the city's come up with to the table here. We're addressing finishing that Oceanfront Park with a proper pool and getting it open again, something decent. We can get that open and still negotiate and work the business, the business side around it, and get a pool worked on that we're doing and provide and bring in people through an RFP process or whatever, or an ITN or whatever process you want to do it, and get that part rolling. But I think that we have the ability. The penny sales tax should touch everybody, not just one project. And that's where I was. And I never said $9 million. I said up to $9 million. And when you asked to change the vote to $9 million, I said absolutely not. And you backed off, and I voted along with you guys because it was up to, not it was $9 million, because we had no idea what the city's needs were. We didn't have this list. We didn't have the list from the other day. And this penny sales tax, in my mind, should be touching everybody. And I think by addressing parking, by addressing whether you like this or not, whatever, we have an opportunity to touch everybody's lives with this and set us up for a brighter future. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I'm not really sure where to begin, Madam Mayor, but I want to do some housekeeping here. First of all, the word consensus has been bantered about, that there's been consensus twice. There has not been consensus. So let's stop telling people untruths. There was never any consensus to drop millions of dollars on a swimming pool up there. Let's get this straight.
it's on the record.
It's not on the record.
Don't go back and forth, guys. Just please make your point.
Also, when you say the people have spoken, with respect to this pool. Basically that petition that was given to the city, many of those people don't even live in this city. We weren't able to verify who they were or whatever, and we just rejected the idea of asking our residents to weigh in on the issue. We won't even let our own residents weigh in the form of a straw poll. So, the people haven't spoken. 36 people have spoken. 36 people, the 36 people that use that.
And you've talked to 20.
Quiet in the chambers. Quiet in the chambers, please. Quiet in the chambers, please.
So let's get back to your proposal, Madam Mayor. A couple things. If you take, based on your suggestion, if you take $1 million out of what the city has proposed here this evening, you now have an $8 million gap in existing needs for capital in the city. And that dollar value does not include any future capital needs that will arise over the next several years as we try to pay for the $8 million in capital needs that we don't have money for. We have no funding sources for this $8 million. There are no funding sources out there for the $8 million. As far as the $5 million proposal for the pool is concerned, I want to remind everybody that we had a heck of a time attracting folks in their interest in the past, be it realtors to lease the space, be it folks willing to get into the casino building itself. I would suggest that, this idea that we're going to build something for $5 million and somebody's going to come and put their name on it and operate from us, that is a pie in the sky. That's a gamble. That's an absolute gamble. And there's no assurance that that's going to happen. Okay? So the only way that I even consider going down that road is if we come up with a plan that would not spend $1 of that money until we had a suitor that came to the city and said, yes, we'll do this. Okay? The other issue that hasn't been addressed is on the beach is the idea of the maintenance, that the additional maintenance is going to be required to maintain whatever you build up there. We can't even keep up with what we have. And there's no funding source been identified for that maintenance either. So, I can't understand, Commissioner Robinson just said, do it right, do it the first time. Well, it seems to me like we're just kind of like doing everything, half what, in the interest of being able to say, well, maybe everybody got a little bit. That's not how this works. That is not how this is supposed to work. We have needs, and we have wants. This city, for 100 years, has been notorious for not addressing the needs and addressing the wants, which is why we fought for 8 years to do the things we've done and move this city in a slightly different direction. What we're proposing right now with dumping all this money into that beach is nothing short of what was done when you and Commissioner Amoroso were elected to office in 2011, when they ran that $6 million project down our throats. And it's been a pain in our butt ever since, and we've not been able to maintain it. And we're going to repeat the exact mistake that was done before. So I'm just, and there are very few people in this city, and I'll just say it, I was the only one publicly that railed against that project for all the reasons that I had laid out. It wasn't put together properly. It wasn't funded properly. The numbers were suspect. None of those things worked. Everything that I suggested was going to happen, happened. And I'm giving you the benefit of my experience once again and telling you, if you go down this road, you're going to make a fundamental mistake that is not going to push the city forward. It's going to make a couple of people happy, okay, but people are just going to step back and say, it's the same old Lake Worth. It's the same old Lake Worth. They're going to continue to behave the way they always have. We get a few bucks in our hands and we act like, drunken sailors. Unfortunate. And that's all I have to say.
So you said that before, and I've heard you say that numerous times. Now we just addressed an entire litany of city needs, functions, parking garages, all kinds of things that we just addressed with the money. It wasn't just a pool. Wasn't putting, I'm not going to go back and forth with you because we don't do that. It's my time.
Oh, you want the final word?
Would you please? We're addressing a lot of needs and a lot of different functions here. Okay, we're not just saying the pool and putting every dollar penny sales tax, as was suggested in the beginning, towards a swimming pool. It's called finishing a project. The project wasn't done right, it wasn't finished, and it needs to be completed. I'm not trying to create some shiny object or pie in the sky dream. It was a facility that was there. With the increase of red tide and algae and all kinds of things that are going on in the world today, you know what can cause that beachfront casino to not make any money? Not being able to go in the water ever again. So we can look at it from a different perspective. Now I do, however, take serious what you said in reference to running both projects parallel. So saying you don't proceed with the pool until you have a business model in place that works with a sign-on, I'm okay with doing that simultaneously. So running them parallel, I'm fine with doing that. Not putting a pool in before we have something to do it. But I would expect that we would need to go immediately out and get the word out and get an ITN or an RFP process going. I've asked for from the very beginning a business model as to what that kind of thing would bring in. I'm not an idiot. I'm a businesswoman. I've owned a business for 20 plus years. If anyone knows a P&L or can read one, I can. I get it. I also know that the rents that we were not in control of at that casino building initially were not good. The CAM was not accurate. We have the ability, and we have changed those things and worked on those items and increased those items, and we may have to do some more adjusting as we make this thing. First of all, I do not think, and as one realtor said back 8 years ago, well, nobody's going to pay $15 a square foot for this property. It's brand new oceanfront property, for crying out loud. I'm so tired of hearing that conversation. There's many businesses, but we act like a bunch of kids and idiots up here that maybe people won't want to invest in our community because we're acting like they did 8 years ago or 10 years ago. Let's be professional, put our best face and foot forward, and have a solid business plan to accompany it. I'm not saying willy-nilly spend the money, and you're making it out that way, and I really resent that. I'm trying to just put the numbers on the table and come up with a business plan to support it, and let's just be focused and do it. Not pontificate, not stand on a platform and politic here. Let's just finish the project and get it done, and then also address the needs of and when you mention the other needs, the other $7 million or the other $8 million, every year there's that much money that goes to deferred something on the budget item. We just saw it all on one list here the last time, and now we're seeing it again. It used to be in our complete budget when we ran the capital and the budget accordingly, and something was deferred from this year to that year or this year to that year. It wasn't on a separate list, so it looks like you could, and that's much to your point. It's not that it's wrong, and I'm not agreeing with you on that. It's not wrong. It's just that you can package it now in a pretty little bow and say, look at what we're not doing. We've always not done probably to that magnitude year after year. Most cities do. But this is at least a comprehensive look at it, put some numbers behind it. Now let's go to the next step and say, let's put an offer out there. See if you can come step up with a business plan that makes this work and makes it work at the beach. I'm not an idiot. Vice Mayor.
I like the idea of P3. I think we should also look at a P3 for the parking in the downtown corridor.
Yes.
I've said it from day one, my biggest issue is a long-term funding source. We've already heard that, we don't have a lot of money in the beach fund, and, I'm concerned that we spend penny sales tax on anything that doesn't have a long-term funding source. And, that's my biggest concern. I've said it before also, if we were to do a pool, I think the pool should be on the west side, closer to the children and the people that use it. Again, there still wouldn't be a funding source. This is my 2 cents. I was concerned when we didn't allow it to go out and let people vote on it, whether they wanted a pool up at the beach. Again, we're moving forward. I like the idea of doing a lot of different things like you had mentioned. I still stand behind putting it in a Tallahassee ask for some of our parks and recreation health needs. What's it going to hurt if we ask? But we'll talk about that later.
Robinson?
Thank you for your positive future looking at our oceanfront park again. This is our, Central Park in New York City. Nobody's talking about, selling any land in Central Park. But, I just, the process that has taken us to this indecision has been flawed, desperately flawed, because we haven't been able to talk. That's we should have had the kitchen table in the beginning of the process, not at the end. It's been designed for primarily lifeguard usage, not tourism or a leasee to address what they would want to give us the highest and best rent for. We need to budget more than $5 million.
My total was 6.
Six. We need to. I'm willing to look at ways we can save on the improvements over there, but it's so grossly underperforming that revenue missed already for the last 6 years. And to say that you're not going to put a nickel more into that losing proposition is really truly business-wise foolishly. It was said at the Finance Advisory Board that if the roof is leaking, I'm not going to put money into flowers. Well, if you have any pride in your house, you're going to maintain the roof and the looks of your home. And this is an embarrassment. This property up there right now with the bathhouses and an empty pool is an embarrassment. And it's, if we don't do anything with it, it's going to demonstrate that we have no pride in our community to the future. We've been blessed with the conversation about addressing what hasn't been addressed, but only through the penny sales tax. We need to tighten up on our management of budgeting things that need to be done. But if we don't address this opportunity to demonstrate that we're investing in ourselves for the future, it's going to be a sorry day for Lake Worth.
I think we should.
Madam Mayor.
Did we hear from? I want to
Yeah, I
hear
have.
from finance advisor.
Just
Any more cards?
before we move on
Do you all
from
have
some
lights on?
points.
Oh, all right. Well, go ahead. No, I'll hear yours. Then I'd like to call up the.
Sure.
You know,
Okay.
board.
There were some things that were said, and the first thing is I would like to get away from the semantical arguments about the meaning of consensus. However you call it, whatever name you put on it, there was a majority of folks who sat on the dais and said some money should be spent on the pool. Whether or not we want to call that a consensus because it wasn't 5 out of 5 is another matter. The other thing is, it's been said that the people have not spoken, and this argument has been used to say a number of things. It's been used to regret the fact that we rejected the idea of putting the pool on the ballot as a referendum. And what I'll say is, we should not hold the pool to a different standard than we hold other potential capital, investments. We didn't put the Shrip on the ballot. We didn't put the tie line on the ballot. No one asked to put these items on the ballot. We recognized as a board that was something that we should do, and therefore we did it. It's why we were elected, to use our judgment to advance policy here from this dais based on input from folks in the public. And I would say that the same applies to the pool. The other thing is, it was said about the petition that we did not verify the identities of the people who signed it. What I will say is that the person who made that comment did not personally retain his copy of the petition. So I don't know how he would have verified that, because that evening he gave that petition to a candidate for office, and that happened right here immediately after the meeting. So I don't know how that person can say that it wasn't verified. Well, he had the opportunity to do so. He didn't retain the petition in order to do that. The other thing is that I frankly view the last municipal election as a referendum by proxy on the pool. In one district, you basically had two candidates who were polar opposites on the pool. We know how that election turned out. I think that the individual who won that election, in a way, created a mandate for us to address this issue if we're going to talk about the importance of elections to making these public policy decisions. And so, I don't think we should hold the pool to a different standard than we hold other major capital projects. It's been said that this list that we've been presented by staff does not address future capital needs. It does. That's why a lot of these things are meant to be spread out over several years, so it addresses needs that are both present and future. It might not address every conceivable wish of staff members or every conceivable need that we haven't thought of, but that's not to say that were this list to be addressed, it would not address future capital needs as well. The other thing is that it's been said that one commissioner said that it concerns me that we would spend penny sales tax dollars on something that could not recoup those dollars, right? That there wouldn't be a funding source for. The one thing that I'll say is, a pool at the beach benefits from parking revenues generated at the beach. And, to the extent that we have raised parking revenues, we have not seen people who use the beach adjust their behavior too much in response to the increased rates. What I'm saying is we raised rates that didn't cause people to go away from the beach. And as a matter of fact, if you go there during prime hours, what you find is that there are still no parking spots. And so an economist looking at that would say that prices are probably too low there. An economist looking at that would say that prices should reflect what the market can bear, and prices are certainly below what the market can bear, as indicated by the lack of parking at the beach. We might say, for example, that, we might not want to think about parking as economically as someone running a business would, but I would say, being that parking is the main source of funding for operations and capital improvements at the beach, we absolutely should get every ounce of potential revenue that we could get and charge what the market would bear. And by the way, the fact that parking revenue at the beach can cover losses at the pool is one reason why you don't want to remove the pool from the beach. Because if you take the pool away from the beach, you take it out of the beach fund, you remove the parking revenue, and you basically have something that you would have to subsidize out of the general fund, and that would be a real disaster. So that's one thing. The other thing, again, no funding source concerns me, said one commissioner about penny sales tax projects. I would remind this commissioner, who has advocated for a parking garage in the downtown with penny sales tax funds, is that we had a parking expert come in here who was from WGI. This parking expert did a feasibility study financially on a parking structure in the downtown. I would remind this commissioner, I would remind this dais and the public that that study came back and said there's no version of a parking garage in the downtown that has a positive NPV or a positive net present value. The most profitable version of the parking garage that was presented was a parking garage with retail wrapped around it on the bottom. That had a 0 NPV, indicating a break-even project, right? And by the way, even if you look at the assumptions that were built into that, the occupancy of the retail was a little interesting, because guess what? We have occupancy problems right now, and that study assumed that the retail would be occupied basically year-round. And that study was showing a parking garage off of the avenue. So what we're saying is that we can occupy spaces on the avenue, but someone is going to pay us top dollar to occupy a space off the avenue year round. They're not going to have very much vacancy. I would doubt that. So again, for someone who's concerned about funding sources with stuff spent with penny sales tax funds, a parking garage is not a good investment, even in the best scenario. The last thing I'll address is it was said that we were being the same old Lake Worth. And that's an interesting comment, because I've advocated for changing the way that we think about some of the issues that we have in the city, namely about height and other land use issues. And I worry that that's what we're being. But you know what, at the end of the day, when we talk about height and when we talk about other land use issues, it's always said, it's always been said, that people say that they don't want their city to change, right? And that the people have spoken. Well, I think the people have spoken about the pool numerous ways, and I think that we absolutely need to dedicate some funding to it. I agree with the mayor that perhaps we need a compromise. Perhaps $9.5 million is not something that we can do. I think we should try to get the best pool that we can, given how people feel about it. But we need a pool at the beach. The people have spoken.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
I'd like to remind the commissioner to my left that the two commissioners he referred to earlier both have names, and we don't like to be, I personally don't like to be referred to.
Normally, actually, I thought by rules, you're supposed to not call the commissioner by name. I thought it was supposed to be.
Oh, so I say one commissioner, another commissioner, one mayor. Is that how you want me to do this?
Yeah,
I don't appreciate being lectured, and I don't appreciate the condescending tone.
I
Here,
know.
here.
And you know
Okay.
what? And I don't like bickering and.
Oh, neither do I, but
pettiness,
you know
so,
something? You can sit here and talk for 15 minutes and tell us how smart you are. The reality of it is.
Point of order.
No, there's no point of order here. The reality of it is, if you are absolutely correct about the pool being a source of drawing new people to the beach,
I didn't say that.
oh, I beg your pardon.
Well, we don't go back and forth, and please
Then
just
we're going
make
to
your
need
point.
parking garage at the beach to accommodate the parking, which is going to add additional cost to the project. We're not looking at this holistically. Okay, we're trying to do this, in a way that we could try to please everybody, and unfortunately, sometimes you can't please everybody. Okay, and Madam Mayor, I reel the jeering from the back if they can't
Please
contain
quiet in
themselves.
the
Would you ask them to
chambers.
leave?
Please quiet in the chambers.
What do we want to say to the people out there that don't have roads?
We just put $7 million for roads.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Okay, so all the roads will be done, right?
Never gonna.
That is just.
Never mind. You know what? I don't want to confuse anybody up here with any facts. I really don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and do the deed. Let's do it.
It's a workshop. We're not voting on anything. You know what? I want to take a break real quickly. When we come back, if the finance board could do their presentation, I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't want to say anything. I'm going to regret it.
It's like giving birth.
They don't have new.
Madam Mayor, 7:42. We're
All
live.
right, let's resume this
long as we don't go
lovely
backwards.
workshop. Thank you all so very much, and we're going to have a presentation, and I think by our Finance Advisory Board.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Calhoun, I'm a member of the Finance Advisory Board, and this is a statement from our chairman that we relayed concerning this whole process. The Financial Advisory Board would like to make the following statement regarding the 2020 budget as well as future budgets. We believe the budgeting process should be bifurcated into two distinct processes: an operating budget approval and a capital budget plan and approval. The operating budget is a one-year budget and the capital budget a 5-year plan that would be updated annually. We recommend the development of the 5-year capital plan. Annual updating and adoption of a 5-year capital plan should include a capital policy and procedure for proposing, assessing, and ranking proposed projects. Departments and elected officials would propose projects they see as necessary or desirable. These projects would be forwarded to the Director of Finance for organization and compilation. A capital planning working group would be formed, made up of department heads. The compiled list of projects would be reviewed and prioritized by the working group. Priority of proposed projects would be ranked by an objective system, such as the one developed by the Government Financing Officers Association. Each project proposed should also be linked to the city's strategic plan. This ranking would then be organized into a report with recommendations that would be forwarded to the City Commission for consideration in the budget workshopping process. The capital planning process can be started very early in the calendar year and brought to the Commission much earlier in the budget process than it was this year. We strongly recommend appropriation of funding of capital improvements based on the needs of the city. We are keenly aware of the potential controversy related to the pool. However, we cannot at this time advocate for leisure services to be funded ahead of needed infrastructure. It is important to determine the real demand for upgrades or repairs to the pool facility, and we recommend taking a referendum under consideration. We believe that through more sensible investing in needed capital improvements, we can build a platform upon which to build the city. We encourage the Commission to refer to the Lake Worth Beach Strategic Plan, and when funds become available, to fund projects that align with the plan and produce a return on investments for the city and residents, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to call up to speak David Arm, followed by Todd Townsend.
Are we timing this? Are we timing this? 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. David Arm, President of the Greater Lantana Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for having us here today. Madam Mayor, Commissioners. There is a parking problem in downtown Lake Worth Beach. I live across the bridge. I used to like to come to a little Thai restaurant called Saito. It's a terrific place. I would get takeout there maybe once a month on a Friday night. On the early side, 6:30. Never once, ever, in the years I went there, was I able to find a legal parking spot just to run and get takeout there. And, you know, I didn't want to walk 100 blocks to do it. I would always park illegally. I never got a ticket. I was lucky. We have one of our chamber board members who lives outside, who loves to come down to Lake Worth Beach for dinner. Came down on a Saturday night, knows the city really well. Couldn't find any parking spot anywhere, and she was willing to walk. Couldn't find a parking spot. You talk about our special events. Street Painting Festival. I volunteered for the Street Painting Festival. I was given a parking placard. Of course, I got there was no room in the parking lot. I parked about 15 blocks away. Now, that's fine for the one festival. Doesn't do you any good on a typical Saturday night or a Friday night. One of the reasons why we have empty storefronts is because, as a business owner, Lake Worth doesn't require their businesses to have dedicated parking. So you have to use street public parking. why in the world would I ever open up a business if I knew that my people were going to have trouble parking? Not only my employees, but obviously my potential customers. That's one reason why you've got a lot of empty storefronts. It makes no sense to open up a business in a place where you don't have parking. And I totally agree with charging for parking. I totally agree that it is a commodity that should be charged for. And I totally agree that business owners shouldn't be taking up the parking spot in front of their business. How dumb is that? But you've got a great little gym in the zoo. I know the owners, and may I go over? Is that possible? I'll do it as quickly as I can.
Courtesy.
But thank you very much. It's a great little gym. They have, I think, 3 or 4 parking spots of their own. You go to a gym, you're going to spend a half an hour, maybe 2 hours. If you have 20 people in that gym at once, that's 20 public parking spots being taken by the gym goers. And that's the same with every restaurant, every business in town. There's got to be a solution, and that solution is somehow to devote some of your sales tax, your 1 cent sales tax money toward parking. I'm not going to tell you guys. It's up to you to figure out how to do it, but you really need parking. I have here a petition. I'd like to read this. As business owners in Lake Worth Beach, we encourage the city to actively and immediately pursue parking remedies in order to relieve the difficulty that our customers have in finding convenient parking spots downtown. We encourage the city to utilize the proceeds of the 1 cent sales tax toward this end. These are all businesses in the downtown corridor. There's over 60 of them that have signed this. I'd like to give that to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And I did, Mike, do you have a copy of the letter here?
They got copies.
At this-
Okay,
yeah.
you have a copy of the letter?
Well, I'll have to distribute that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, because we did write a letter from the
Get copies.
the Greater Lantana Chamber of Commerce requesting the same thing, basically. So please distribute that. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Townsend, followed by Jill Carlin.
Hi, everybody. Todd Townsend, 502 South J Street. Couple quick things. I know my time is short. We had a discussion at our last meeting about widening 6th Avenue South. And I think that with a middle turning lane there, yeah, really good idea. That's going to be really good. And the second thing is this proposed parking garage behind all the stores, that we're talking about. The space calls for a 1-story parking garage. So now you don't have to bring water up there. You don't have to bring elevators up there. And you have a drop off onto every street. And you have a ramp for wheelchairs, and you have stairs going down at every corner. So now you spread your parking out so that 2J's has parking, and everything, to the west of the downtown has parking. And I think that would work really, really well, because nobody wants a big, tall parking lot looking down into their backyards. I'm sure nobody's going to like that. And the last thing real quick is you all do this in your way as you clean it all up, because this guy can do anything. And then I'll do this. Motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill Carlin, sorry, before. She said she is using penny sales tax for the pool. She's for it. Please create a sustainable pool. Drew Martin, followed by Cammie Anderson.
The first thing I just want to ask is, I asked the county commission to not use styrofoam, and I'm going to ask the city of Lake Worth the same thing. I don't think it's a good use of city expenses. If you come to the dais, you should be able to bring your own coffee cup. Not directing that at anyone in particular.
Yeah.
I think we should be, I agree with Commissioner Robinson, that we should invest in the pool, because I think the pool would enhance the beach. And I think having a vacant pool makes the beach look undeveloped and in bad condition. I don't think that the city has the money for a parking garage. It's interesting to note that we fought tooth and nail to prevent the city from selling parking areas that were purchased by the Downtown Association. In fact, one of them is still a lot, but the city no longer owns it. It was only Commissioner McKinnon's vote not to sell the lot across from the post office, and we were there till midnight fighting to do that. The Lucerne itself was built on a parking area, as a matter of fact. And Commissioner Robinson told me tonight that that was originally supposed to have public parking as part of that development. So, we need to look forward as a sustainable city and talk about how we're going to get people out of their cars. I just came back from San Francisco, and I didn't have to get in a car one single time. We need to be talking about, here in Palm Beach County, more public transportation, more walkability. I myself have always been able to find parking when I came downtown, but I'm willing to walk further. But I would like to see more bicycle parking, because I ride a bike, and one of the problems is when I got downtown, I can't find bicycle parking. So maybe that ought to be something we should spend. But I really think that the pool is an important asset, and that's what we should be investing the penny sales tax in. Thank you.
Cami Anderson, followed by Annette Kay.
Mayor, Commissioners, Town Manager, my name is Cami Anderson. I am a resident of Lake Worth. I own a business in Lake Worth, and I'm the co-chair of the Lake Worth Business Committee underneath the umbrella of the Lantana Chamber. And I came here tonight because I feel it's really important that we have parking. Me personally, as someone who lives in Lake Worth, and I have a business on 13th and Dixie, as my husband works hard in the garage, I am running customers around, getting people lunch. I'm getting him lunch. So of course, as a business owner, it's important to me to always use a Lake Worth business. That's my mantra. So I always go downtown to try to see Andy and get a shake there, and go to 2J's and get Joe his roast beef sandwich, and get my hair cut over at Maurice's, and I could go on and on. I don't have much time. But the point is that I live and work in Lake Worth, and I know there needs to be parking. The businesses downtown need more parking out in front so people can get to them. I was also going to say I just moved to Vernon Heights from 6 South, and when I lived on N Street, just 2 houses before 6 South, when the street painting comes, everybody parks all the way down where I am. They park in front of my driveway. They even park in my driveway. Lots of us use cones so they don't come into our driveway. Every time there's an event that's large, people are parking on my street. So that just highlights the parking. So that's what I'm here for. I wanted to explain that to all you and let you know how I personally feel, and that I represent the other businesses. There were other people here, but they had to leave, other business. So I guess 2 things I'll leave you with is, 1, if we get a parking garage, we could use the proceeds for a pool. And 2, I told my husband about this morning as he was eating his breakfast, and he turned to me and he said, "What would City Pace be without a parking lot?" Thank you.
Annette Kay, followed by Don Rosenshine.
Hello, panel. My name is Annette. It's actually Krupnicka, 115 South C Street, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Sort of off the cuff right now, wasn't expecting this, but the pool has been on the table for quite some time, and it is frustrating. And I am a local business. I'm a local realtor here in Lake Worth and surrounding area. I see the city. I'm new to the city, three and a half years or so. Purchased my condo about 1.5 years ago. And as a realtor, I look at it and I see a broken down pool, a prime real estate on top of the casino. You've been enjoying a cocktail looking over the ocean, intercoastal, 2 waterways. We have a dock that's not allowed to have sailboats. We have a Gulfstream hotel that's a ghost town. And this is what we have. And also to encourage me, I am sort of semi within walking distance to downtown. Downtown is like sort of a destination. I would, if it was prettier, to be honest with you, I would probably enjoy a stroll, just and stop for an ice cream or whatever, just a non-destination stroll. I mean, just a facelift of some sort. Put some pretty landscaping down there, pots. We're not Delray, we're not West Palm Beach, we're in between. We have an essence that's very unique, and I would love to see us capture that a little bit more. And yes, for the pool. I mean, there's no question. It's a destination. It's powerful. It's powerful. Nobody else has a pool like we have a pool. It's a very powerful destination too for Lake Worth. And I guess I can't wrap myself around, and I probably can speak for a lot of other people, that these things are on the agenda for the penny sales tax. Where's the money? Like, why are these things on the agenda to begin with? It seems like these things should have been taken care of with our current taxes. So I can't wrap myself around that right now, and hopefully that can come to the surface at some point. And I really would love to see that casino building active. I've been up there as an agent. I've seen the potential. That's $25,000 to $30,000 a month coming into revenue. Thank you.
On Rosenshine?
I appreciate Don Rosenshine. Lake Worth,
Talk into the microphone, Don, please.
Golf Course Road, 131 North.
Speaking to the microphone.
Oh, okay. There is a way through this. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We spent $152,000 with this CPZ to develop a pool. I think both of those schemes are terrific. We have to synthesize those schemes and find out exactly what we want, and we need to take some time to do that. There needs to be some adjustments. Everyone seems to understand what the adjustments are. So I think that we should forget about the 9.5 million, forget about everything, just put it out for bid and find out where we are. We, in the narrative, we can forewarn the bidders that we have X amount of money for the pool, and we may not be able to, to respond to their bids. Secondly, at the same time, we ought to put an RFQ out and attend to it. Attend to it, market it. There are restaurants who want to come in and do something with that 8,000 square feet and have concessions, the wedding concessions, which are $4,000 and $3,000 a piece, depending on where they are, and the cabana concessions, and the pizza delivery concessions. You've got 2 retail stores over there, and they can take care of that too. Then they can pay us the same thing that Benny's does, or maybe a little less, and that will mitigate expenses to this pool. And you do it at the same time. You do the RFQ at the same time as you do the bid. I understand that you have to accommodate. I understand that there are capital expenditures that need to be taken care of. We're not parochial or unsophisticated. We love the city. We think we can mitigate the deficits by bringing in a restaurateur. We believe we can do that, but the only way to do that and find out, and this is very important, if the restaurateur comes in and he wants to build out the tiki hut, that's great, because that means we don't have to spend money on the tiki hut for the pool. That will lower the price of the pool and bring it down to maybe 8 or 7. We're so close then, we can make it work. Does that make sense? Because
thank you. I'm sorry, you're way past your time.
There is a way to do it, but do it at the same time. Don't waste the $152,000 for 2 wonderful schemes and not put it out after you adjust it. And at the same time, you put out the RFQ, and we can be creative.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I took a lot of time, but that's the way to do it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any more cards?
No, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, my final comments would be, I think, we need to find money for a pool that is a good pool that, will be used by the residents, and I believe it will be used by the residents. Again, if you look at the numbers, per hour, our pool was used more than other pools in the county, like Lake Lytle. There were more users per hour for every hour that our pool was open than there were at Lake Lytle and then there were at Wellington's pool. And I think that's important. So I think a pool is critical here. Folks have asked for a pool. They've expressed it over and over again. We should accommodate them. There are also other items that we have to find a way to work in. Maybe we don't work it in this year, right? We're waiting for the CRA to go about their RFP process to get some of our money back. Maybe we work them in subsequent years. And then, the last thing I'll say, about, again, parking in the downtown, it was said that there might be proceeds from a parking garage. Again, I want to, remind folks the presentation that we got, and this was from a company that studies parking and that engineers parking garages, okay? Shows that parking garages have all of the versions of a parking garage except for one had a negative net present value. That means there are no proceeds, that there are negative proceeds, that there's money that we would never get back. And then the only one that showed a $0 net present value, which indicates a break-even, investment, was one that had retail, but the assumptions for the retail were not realistic, given what we already know about retail here in the city, and about the fact that I think we probably have a surplus of retail here in the city. And then the last thing that I'll say, again about parking is it's been said repeatedly, and I have had to accept this, that we want to be not even a mid-rise city, but a low-rise city, okay, and that we want to be a low-density city, okay, and that applies to our downtown. So what we say is that we want a low-rise downtown with low density but abundant parking. Those things don't match up, and it's a bad investment. There's not a city in America right now trying to figure out how to have more parking. If you look at what other cities are doing right now, even cities like ours that supposedly have these parking problems, they've found ways to manage the parking that they have by pricing it. And then before they add supply, they look at it and they see, okay, what has pricing it done to the way that people use it? The last thing I'll say, that's it. So those are my comments. Again, I don't think we're taking any official action here this evening. So that's it.
Any other comments? See, Commissioner Robinson?
Well, I'd like to look forward to the next opportunity to get down to the details of going out to bid on our oceanfront park and being able to agree on what we want to see up there. I don't think we all agree necessarily on the plan so far, but we need to move forward, and if we could set a date just to talk about the design, the completion of the improvements up there. That would be
I
great.
think that what the city manager started in the very beginning, looking for a thumbs up or a thumbs down or whatever, I thought I put together a pretty well-rounded look at things. I would say what I find really funny is that both of you are arguing the same argument about different things. You're arguing
get copies.
parking structures, and the same argument that you're making, he's making.
We're gonna get copies of those.
Which is pretty funny.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, I would just say that I think I offered something that addresses every single aspect that people were talking about. I think that it's smart to run parallel, putting a business plan numbers together with the discussion of a pool and putting out an RFP just to see what the market will bear and what it'll cost and what it'll support, what type of responsibilities would this person want over the maintenance and care and hours and structure and rentals and what type of revenue can be generated there. Well, we do that to see if there's a proper business plan in place, and we put out an RFP or an RFQ. We fine-tuned the existing documents that we got from the groups to see how we can create something like this plan. And city manager, do you know what this? Have you seen these pictures?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And because it's very similar. I mean, and we have some of the same options based on what plans that they gave us. But it addresses you can't say it doesn't address everybody's needs. It addresses all the city's needs, staff's needs, parking. We've addressed just about everything. So that sales tax is touching a lot of people in a lot of different ways, including, most importantly, the basic public safety and measures that the city needs. and sets us up for future success.
Madam Mayor, just so that we can clarify, and it sounds like we're kind of winding down towards the end here. What I'm hearing from you, this is what you're saying, the Triolo compromise, the numbers that you basically stated, is that what the commission is going to expect to see coming back on the appropriation?
That's what I'm asking them. right
Okay,
now.
well-
my
Or we can break it apart into pieces, and whatever one we need
If you want
to
to
go
get together.
forward, we can have another meeting if you'd like and continue more in-depth discussions, whatever the pleasure of.
Mine was basically, I was just taking the dollar amount there, just basically the city's recommendation. I eliminated $1 million out of that, leaving 5.875 million, or close to 6 million for a pool and a build out of a shell structure of some kind, and creating a business plan, obviously to see what kind of revenues would support that structure. With that money to only be spent if we have a proper business plan in place to support it.
And I appreciate that. I guess there's a couple of items on here. What the first one, the motor pool building.
Without a doubt.
Well, can I get a thumbs?
Yeah. Motor pool? The motor pool building?
You know, we should be ready for that. And I'm not so sure that it's a desperate need right now.
Have you been in it?
Yes,
Inside of it?
yes.
Outside of it?
And I'm not an expert, and we do things on data and information, and we've spent a lot of money on the casino park improvements, and are sort of I'm willing to. If it's going to mean moving forward with that, I thought $1 million towards the public works building was good, because they're generating money. They're going to bond, and I don't know how they're going to work out separating the $40 million you're going to bond for out of
For the municipal bonds?
Yes.
It's among the various utilities, including sanitation, water, electric.
And public works. And so, I don't know how you're going to work that out, but I think you should be able to work that out if this building is in the straits that it's in, according to what you hear. Then you need to work that out of the 40 million that you're going to bond for.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify for Commissioner Robinson, this is divided up based on the users, which include probably 2/3 of the price going to the utilities, and it will be paid for under the bond. There's still activities, code enforcement, general government that uses motor pool buildings. So that's how we came up with the fact that it impacted the general government side by $1.5 million. Secondly, there was a study and report that documented and put out there officially the condition of the structure and the need to replace it. So our concern is that something happens in that building, our liabilities there become a little different, and it's a structure that goes back when it was damaged, Francis Wilman Jean. So it's been a well-known, documented heap of rusting metal.
Well, this is a major decision as far as I'm concerned, because if we're going to do this for the trucks, I thought we were going to have some conversation about sustainability department and planning and all the other departments at 1900 Second Avenue. And
you want to spend more money?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know that we've had a conversation about outsourcing, leasing, or even the possibility of generating our, I don't know if we can be in the business of truck repair, but if we could have space that's leasable to a private business. We have talked about a lot of expenditures and the limited income. We haven't focused on revenue and ways to generate revenue, which, government isn't big on business, but if there's a possibility to generate revenue from that property over there, I would like to spend some more time talking about it before we spend $1.5 million.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm not against funding, general government's share of the motor pool. I would condition my support for it on other things not being included in this list. So I don't want to say yes, right, on the motor pool, right, and then get rolled on other items that I don't think should be included. So just that's a part of it here. The other thing, and I had this discussion with Jamie. Jamie and I had a long discussion about this outside of the motor pool building about the reason why we need to fix it is because we insist on doing our own garage operations, fixing the cars and things like that. And I asked Jamie, had we formally explored basically outsourcing that function, because if we outsource that function, we no longer need the building, and we no longer then need to spend the $1.5 million on it. Now there are some offices there that we'd have to figure out, where would people be? But I think we should explore that. But again, I don't want to say yes on the motor pool at this stage of this conversation, and then, so I'm going to have to withhold it. Now, the general idea of the Triolo compromise, which is, cut some stuff from this list, add to this list the pool, and it's kind of like a balancing act. I'm not against the general idea. The figures I really need to sit with and discuss, and I would like to see us explore the option of outsourcing that activity, of fixing the cars and doing all of that.
You can have those.
Madam Mayor, we actually have gone through those exercises, and we will share that information.
Did we put out bids?
I know that Jamie's actively worked with other entities that represent other cities on general vehicle fleets. When it gets into the heavy equipment, which is represented the 2/3 of what we need the building for, when you look at the garbage truck, the utility vehicles, the electric vehicles, the ability to take those $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 pieces of equipment, and the only places that actually service them are distances, and doing work that we can do in the facilities when it needs to happen really saves us a lot of money. Okay. So that's...
Madam Mayor, can we pause right there on that point? Mm-hmm. Okay. So what you're saying is that for the vehicles that are used for general government functions, code enforcement trucks, right? Mm-hmm. Cars and stuff like that, that it's not such a big deal to outsource that, because there are people out there nearby who can do that stuff. But for the hold on a second. But for the larger vehicles, like you said, it's the larger vehicles that we really need to have the ability to do this stuff right now when we needed to do it, rather than send it off far away.
I said that Mr. Brown was exploring those options because that was the one that, generally in government, the most common type of vehicle relationships that exist for him to explore. Not everybody has an electric utility and the heavy kinds of equipment that we have. That was my point. So there's a couple of things, and he can share the information with you that he's learned. I don't know if this is the venue to do that. We have a need right now. We have a facility that employees and equipment is stored and worked on that floods with water. It's dangerous. It's documented in a study. We don't get a big pass here, and that's why I'm kind of sort of trying to get y'all to get some kind of agreement that we need to move forward with investment.
I don't want to I want to solve the problem.
I understand.
The problem is that the vehicles need to be serviced. And right now we have chosen to address that problem by servicing all the vehicles ourselves. And what I heard you say earlier was that it's the heavier pieces of equipment that we absolutely need to be able to service in a timely fashion. And so was that accurate?
That's what I said, but my intention with the general side is that Mr. Brown was exploring options and looking at pricing on those things, and it's coming back that I'll let you speak for
Yeah,
yourself.
we already have. Quickly, just kind of go through it. We went up to Palm Beach Gardens a few weeks ago, myself and my assistant director, Felipe Lafazo, because they have recently reached out to Enterprise. They've got a contract with Enterprise to lease some of their vehicles. They still own a good portion of their vehicles, but they're also leasing as well. When we met with the Enterprise rep 2 years ago, they even said it didn't make sense for us. We're a small city, 7 square miles. When we purchase our vehicles, we do not discard them after 4 or 5 years. Because of the size of our city, we're not putting that kind of mileage on the vehicles where we would need to discard them after 4 or 5 years. So we can get a lot more out of our vehicles than a much larger city. Say if you were the county or a much larger municipality like Boca Raton. Because of that, it doesn't make sense for us to move to a lease program for our vehicles, because then you're going to be swapping those vehicles out every 4 or 5 years, and it's a consistent payment that you're making, which right now we're not making that payment. Also, just kind of more than just the heavy equipment side of things, our fleet facility runs with 6 employees. If we had a fleet facility of 15 employees, where you now are floating those salaries and benefits and everything else and insurance, it's a different conversation because it's a much larger operation. We only have 6 employees that run that entire facility. That doesn't make it work when we look at outsourcing that entire operation. We're going to be coming out of pocket a lot more money than we are right now to put this whole operation out. The numbers just don't work. We've looked into this multiple times over the years, and the numbers just do not work with the number of employees we currently have.
Okay, question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
I think, my fellow commissioners, I think that if we all went through this list, we would see items that we could say I like or I don't like, and you eloquently called it the Triolo compromise. It is just that. There are things that you might not particularly like, or this person may not particularly like, but the goal here is that we have things that we're all gaining things that we do want and that we do need, most importantly. So with that said, I would ask that you look at the bigger picture of getting these items and not kicking the can down the road on any of them by I mean, I understand that you want information on it and you can have conversations on it, but I think this is the closest place we've come to appeasing the needs of the city, the wants of the community, projects being completed, future being looked at in regards to needs, whether they are perceived or real. Time will tell, but we have this opportunity here to move these things forward. And I would urge you that, yes, everyone, I'm sure sitting here could find issues that they may perhaps like better than another.
And just one last comment from me. You had mentioned the whole want and need thing earlier. As the city manager had mentioned, we did have a structural analysis done on the current facility. This is not a want, it's a need. We have a major liability situation there, and depending on how we decide to fund it, there's something that needs to move forward.
I wanted to do this for you 7 years ago. So
I understand. It's just it's getting to a point now that we have a real situation.
It was bad then, so I get it. Commissioner Robinson.
I like compromise. I thank you for using compromise as a way to move us forward. Because the casino park isn't even on the spoken here. It's here, but it isn't. Concerns me.
But it will be next time.
Well, I'm not sure of that because, I thought we were going to have a conversation about our possibilities in July, and here it is, and then there's this conversation about going to referendum, which astounds me because there's, the lack of strength to make a decision.
If we were in a boardroom and not sitting up here as elected officials, it would be an entirely different animal. I mean, think about that. If we were in a boardroom and not electeds, there wouldn't be all of these lights going off and arguments going back and forth. We'd sit there and say, okay, all right, so that sounds like a good. If you believe in that, let's get out there to the community. Let's market this. Let's do this. Let's do that. Whatever. Let's get out there and talk to people about public-private partnerships in the parking garage as well. Or in a way, let's get out there and put the information out there. Start to get numbers assigned to these things. Put business plans together. Okay, there we go. But we can't do that because we have to sit here and and have these arguments and go whatever. And the only thing it does is delay the actual projects from happening. Look how long it took for 500,000 projects in the city. So I don't think anyone wants that. So I would just think before you vote or think what you'd like to move forward.
So, Madam Mayor, when y'all did your thumbs, I thought 3 or 4 thumbs to bring this back on the appropriation, which is another vote. Y'all
Yeah.
can
Oh,
do.
we're gonna go back.
I'm
Talking
gonna
about
take that
consensus.
as a yes. If we want to say and address the pool, and I hear what Commissioner Robinson is saying, and you've floated an amount out there as a compromise amount. I believe it's $6 million. Is that something y'all want to do a thumbs up on as an appropriations towards the pool and the concept? And we can have more conversations how to roll that out. But getting it appropriated is
Madam
kind
Mayor.
of intent.
No. We have tried previously to commit ourselves to a number on that item. I am not committing myself to that number right now. I need to look at what things in here can be addressed either with other funds or that can be addressed either with funds that return from the CRA or that can be delayed or year to. I'm again, the idea, I'm okay with the idea. The pool number goes down from 9 or 9.5 million to some number less than 9 million. But I need to see what that looks like. I'm not committing to that here today. Not committing to that here today. And
And you can just add another year onto the project.
well, there are some things here.
No, I'm just being truthful.
That's one thing. But there are some things here that we can either fund differently, or that can be Bryant Park band shell. $145,000. The public safety complex stuff, totally get it. The elevator stuff.
And we can
our
leave that
stuff.
$1.2 million for more discussion by all means. I'm again, we changed and the list has morphed based on the input we're getting. So again, at some point, I know y'all need to end the meeting. I need some kind of direction on what to bring back next time. Is there any other categories here that y'all feel comfortable committing to an appropriated amount? Whether it's the cybersecurity, the roads and sidewalks, you had suggested, I think, taking $1 million off of that. Is there any appetite to give us any direction on that at this time for bringing back an item?
I'm at a loss at this point.
Okay. Well,
I don't.
Well, can I?
No, I'm at a loss because you guys don't understand that all or nothing attitude is going to get you nothing. It's going to get everybody nothing. It's going to make us look like a bunch of idiots, and it's going to kick the can down the road a long period of time. Sorry.
Madam Mayor, I'm willing to compromise. I'm not willing to settle on that number today. I recognize I might not be able to get all that I want, but I want as much of what I can get. And so it's not clear to me what I can get today, this evening, and I'm therefore not going to commit myself to a number. So I need to really think and look and come back and the other thing is,
I'm just speaking from experience.
if this were a boardroom also, like if this were PepsiCo, right, and we're, board directors at PepsiCo, what would happen also, which we can't, is that we'd talk to each other, and that's something that we can't. So everything happens up here, and that also makes it difficult to arrive at these compromises. So, but I need to look at
here
this.
for a while, and I see what happens, and the more you start to tear things apart and pick things apart, whatever, when you have an open opportunity, move something forward, it stalls it out, and more information will come in, and more things will get in the way, things will happen. I'm just speaking from past experience. I'm not bringing up statistics. I'm just bringing in my personal belief, and
I think that process that you described has already happened. We had an opportunity to settle on a number earlier, as far as the pool. And what has happened is more information has come in, the situation has gotten more complicated. and that's and so I recognize that things happen when you delay or wait or consider, but I need to do that.
Mr. Robinson?
I'd like to set a date to, we spent a lot of money on CPC and the process that was truly flawed because of the Sunshine Law and because of the way the process was handled. So all I'm asking for, I'm good. This tonight, obviously consensus means a lot more to other people than it does to others. So, we're talking about a consensus tonight. I'd like to set a date to talk about a casino park improvement project, which we haven't really truly had one yet. And can we set a date to have a kitchen table about how we're going to move forward with whatever amount of money we need? We spent a lot of money, and they were estimating more money than we're talking about. And we've done, do it right, do it once. I'd like to do it right, do it once, and finish this underperforming asset up there. We're talking about embarrassment. That's a physical embarrassment. We can disagree. We don't argue. We just disagree. There's a difference. We're all truly have the best of Lake Worth at heart here, but we can disagree. It's okay. We need to have a meeting and compromise. And can we come up with a date?
Madam Mayor.
Can we agree to a date to talk about?
Madam Mayor.
No?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Robinson, I'm trying to figure out exactly what you are asking us to bring back. This conversation here, we had hoped that there was going to be some more that kitchen table conversation where we all sort of bat our ideas around. If we bring back another workshop, I have one scheduled next Thursday. I mean, if y'all want to keep meeting every week until we hammer through this list, we're happy to schedule this and have that opportunity to hone the information, bring it back as many times as you want. We're to help y'all get to some end result here. But I think there's different expectations about what a kitchen table conversation really is and who wants to talk about what. And we've done 2 studies. We did the initial layout and then we did the follow-up one, and we have a lot of good information and ideas. And then, Mayor, you presented some interesting information that we've all kind of known about that's out there with the pool down south and the cost there. And there's even in the public, you hear people saying, well, you need to put something out to bid because we really don't know what the price is until the bids. We're kind of at a logjam here. We can't get to market if we don't have something to show people what we want them to do. And I can't get to what to want you to do because there doesn't seem to be agreement or even an attempt to sort of say, let's look at a price here that works in the big scheme of things as a compromise. At some point, there's almost a leap of faith involved in doing this. And, to get to the next steps, y'all have to come to some compromise and decision. And I'll have another workshop if you want and call it, I need direction to do that and call it a kitchen table, but y'all may be coming back to the same conversation you're having right now.
We're going to always come back to the same
So,
conversation.
I'm at a loss too.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
So the 24th is on?
Thank you.
I didn't get direction to do the 24th.
Good.